Hello everyone. Welcome to Expert Talks Online. I'm John Dickinson, Chief Commercial Officer at Equal Experts. Equal Experts is a network of software delivery consultants. It's made up of practitioners with years of hands-on delivery experience, and we focus on people, not process. All of our people are brilliant with many years of experience, and we invest in a grown-up culture that makes them, gives them the freedom to stay hands-on and keep delivering good work, and also gives them the autonomy to do their work well. So our expert talks today are celebrating International Women's Day. We have a series of lightning talks from brilliant women in the Equal Experts Network, and there are two live talks today. Unfortunately, we were lined up to have three, but unfortunately, Neha isn't able to join us for the third talk. But we have this session today. It's at 8 a.m. GMT, and one later today at 6 p.m. GMT. So in this session, we're joined by Bethan Timmins, Managing Director of Equal Experts Australia and New Zealand. Bethan started working with Equal Experts back in 2015. She set up our Australia office in 2017. And Bethan will be explaining how to use the cost of delay to prioritize cloud migration from experience that she's had in the past. And we're also joined today by Abby Bangser. So Abby's a site reliability engineer and part of the Equal Experts Network. Abby has been working in software development for 10 years, and she'll be talking about exposing the language barriers in software delivery. And I'm also joined by Tony Nguyen, who's a director and head of delivery in our Australia office. He works closely with Bethan, and he's joining today as co-host, so we can help facilitate the session. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over Bethan to you for the first talk. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, John. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are today. Really good to be on doing an expert talks again. It's been a while since I've done this, and I'm quite excited to get started. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Hopefully this will work lovely and we won't have technical issues. Is everyone seeing my screen okay? Brilliant, fantastic. So my talk today is really about using cost of delay to prioritize a cloud migration. So I thought what I would do is actually just start about talking about what is a cost of delay, and then look at a particular case study around a cloud migration that we were part of, and then look at how we actually applied cost of delay in this case study to help us prioritize the migration of those applications to the cloud. So I'm just going to actually just start off first with what is cost of delay. Actually, the credit really goes to Don Reinerson here for this. He was actually the main person behind the cost of delay as a concept that we know within product delivery today. That's his lovely mugshot there. There are two really great books that I'd recommend that explore cost of delay in a lot more detail than I'm going to go into today. And if I was to pick one of those two books for you to pick and have a look at Managing the Design Factory, because that is the one I'd recommend for most of you. It is quite a good book, that one. So I'm going to actually just start off with what really is cost of delay. And normally when conversations start, they don't start off with what is cost of delay. Actually, the conversation leads to cost of delay normally starts something like this. So it's, Beth, can you help me? I want to be able to do product delivery faster. I'm sure, no problem. First question, why do you want to do that? Often it's the main reason is because they want to make more money. And then the next question I normally ask is, great, how much is that worth to you? And that isn't normally a question that people are expecting me to ask at that point. Most commonly questions that are asked is how much faster or how much money? But when you ask the question in this way, the answers are always as quick as you can or as much as possible. But by asking what it is worth to them, the people need to think about the value that what they're asking for actually brings to what they're asking. So how do you put value on what that time is actually worth to you? So if we do this project and everything goes to plan, then this is how much money we will make. And And if we're looking at a standard product delivery, you've got the red line here, which is the area, is the how much it costs to actually develop a product. And then the blue area is the revenue that can be achieved by this. So if we look at the cost, you will see as the product is being delivered, it is costing money, but we haven't launched anything yet, so we don't have any revenue from it. But we could, at product launch, maybe expect to see a huge spike in revenue and sales and then tail off. Or alternatively, you could see models of the opposite where you see a gradual increase in revenue. But by being able to model that, you can then see the value comes from your total revenue minus your total costs. So if we start like introducing net to that, what we get to see in that point is as time goes on, we can see how much we are under, or actually how much we're making as a consequence for that. And you'll see where the yellow line here, which represents the net, crosses the red and blue, that's your break-even point. That's when you're starting to make money. And you'll see even in the diagram that I've done before, for this particular project, it would be 7.5. Let's just say that's 7.5 million, for example. And that would be what the value is for this particular initiative. So what would happen if you were 2 months late or 2 months later than you expected? So at a minimum, you may see the overall costs increase. But actually, worse still, you may even miss out an opportunity in the market that could result in less revenue than expected, which actually means that the added costs and the reduction in revenue could put you in a position where you actually just don't even break even at all. So in this example, if we compare that we've just done exactly the same project, but we've moved it 2 months late, we've now got minus 1.5, I think it is. So for a 2 month delay, that has actually cost us 8.5 million from the 7 that we would have had before compared to the 8.5. So by trying to articulate a value in terms of the months of delay, that is what gives us what the cost of delay is. So when we're thinking about calculating cost of delay, what do we need to do to try and create that? The first thing is we want to look at the user and the business value. So what is the relative value to that customer or the business? And do our users prefer this over that? Or what is the revenue impact on your actual business itself? Maybe there's even a potential penalty or other negative effects if we actually delay the start of it. The next thing is around time criticality that we need to factor in. So how does the user or business value decay over that time, or is that a fixed deadline? So that will normally show you the curve of that blue graph, whether it's going to have a quick revenue rise at the beginning and decrease, or whether it will increase over time. Also, will they wait for us, or will you move on to another solution in terms of your customers? Are there milestones on that critical path that are impacted by it? And what is the critical or the current effect on that customer satisfaction? All of those affect that time criticality. Then the last thing we need to factor in is that risk reduction opportunity. So what else does this do for our business as a consequence of doing this product? Does it reduce the risk of this or a future delivery? Is there value in the information that we will receive? And will this feature enable new or business opportunities? So all of this information together, the best way that I've used this before is to try and put it in some of the example graphs that I've shown you before so that you can see how the revenue or the costs happen across the lifetime of that project or that initiative or product, and where that net break even is so that you can easily calculate that cost of delay in time. So I'm going to move actually now onto the cloud migration side of it and just explain to a little bit about the cloud migration and how that kind of conversation started. So quite similar. Beth, I need to migrate our apps to the cloud. Sure, Steve, why do you want to do that? I need to save some money on our infrastructure. It's too expensive and it takes too long to deliver any changes on those apps. So my question was, can I ask how much this is worth to you? Good questions. All of the infrastructure is worth millions, but I've got no idea what the cost of change is worth to me. Can you help? And it was using that information that we thought maybe there's a possibility here that cost of delay could help us with this and articulate that problem better. So let me just explain a little bit about the context of this case study and where we were with it. We had, 55 applications. We looked at the infrastructure that these applications were on and tried to find out what they're being used, what the capacity used were. And we noticed in this that actually the majority of the time, the infrastructure was only being used about 20% of the time. But there was one peak month when it was used at 100%. So we thought, okay, let's drill in a little bit more to this. And we just looked at that one peak month. And in that, we noticed actually throughout that month, most of it was used around 40 to 50%, but at the end of it, it started going more to 100%. So we looked at that date particularly, and that's when we saw even then within that day, there were peak moments in that day when it was used at capacity at 100%. And what we noticed with that was actually there was 12 hours in the year that it was at full capacity in that time. 25% of that capacity was being used in total when we looked at the cost for the entire year. Of the applications, 25% of those applications actually had any change done to them in that year. And there were 2 release cycles in a year. And the wait was always about 6 months to get your change actually into production. So we really wanted to understand the infrastructure problem at a deeper level. So what we did is we done this beautiful picture, which is pulled out of the woodwork of when we mapped actually the physical servers and all of the applications on them and the instances of those applications. And what we did, we specifically looked at what the servers looked like at peak time so that we could see where it was being used, when it was peak and how much of it. We looked at what was on that, what was deployed on there, and again, on how many instances. And from that, we were really able to calculate a relative spend. So just a simple calculation of the cost to run an instance of an app by the number of instances deployed to give us a rough estimate. And really, this wasn't to be accurate. This was just to give us a relative sizing to help us prioritize and not to be able to be accurate to the penny. And we could see that that's where all the money was going. So what we wanted to do was also understand the problem with the rate of change. So the questions we were trying to ask here were how often the apps were changing, how long each app was taking to change on an app by app basis. What is slowing down that rate of change? But also how much does that change actually cost in order to make that change? And it was with this information then we were trying to use that data to try and help us do some calculations. So given the context of the actual migration that we were under the problem statement of how might we migrate these 55 applications in a way that allows us to add most value as quickly as possible, because that delay would mean that they were going to carry on paying the infrastructure costs and carry on paying the cost to deliver this while we're trying to migrate. So now, how did we use cost of delay in this cloud migration? We actually had the 4 different approaches here. We really needed to understand the costs so that we got what that red line was on the graph. We needed to understand the savings. We needed to understand the effort involved in doing the migration. And then from that point, we wanted to try and work out what that cost of delay is. So understanding the costs. What were the costs to actually run a server? How much capacity did that app take? And what was the cost to actually run that application? And then what was the cost to make that change to the application? All of those added up to understanding the total costs, as well as the cost to run. So the second one was about understanding the savings. So what were the costs to run a server's worth in the cloud rather than running it on the physical infrastructure? And then at an application level, what was the cost to run that application in the cloud so that we could get a lower level of abstraction for that? What would be the cost to make the last change that was made on that application, but in the newly migrated app, so that we can really figure out if there was a difference in that cost of change? And then what is the difference then between all of these, between then and now? And that would give us an understanding of the savings. The third then was to really try and understand the effort. So the first thing we did was to do a proof of concept to actually understand the effort to migrate. And we picked one application and we did that migration to really get an understanding of how we would go about it and what the effort would be to do that. We wanted to pick an application that was low on change and low risk so that we weren't impacting other business events that were happening, but that could really give us an understanding of the effort, but also the cost involved in that proof of concept itself. And then we use that as a relative sizing against the other applications that then needed to be migrated. So from all of that information, we were then able to work out what the cost of delay. So the costs included all of the current operational costs, plus the cost to migrate itself, which we got from the effort. For the profit, we actually used the savings because this was lost money that we were now getting back. The profit actually only started when we decommissioned a full server, because that was the moment that we were actually going to start realizing some of those benefits. And the delay was counted if we decommissioned at the end of the project, so that we could see what would happen if we were waiting to delay that. So what we did then was we prioritized each application migration against each other. And what would be the cost of delay for each application if it was just delayed by 1 month? And we used a term called weighted shortest job first to help us do that prioritization. And that is, what is the job size relevant to the proof of concept that we used for that calculation? So weighted shortest job first is simply the cost of delay divided by the job size. So here's an example of some of the ones that we did against the applications that were there. And we could see that moving the SA 1718 application was going to be 10 times bigger than moving the information app, which was our proof of concept. And then we could use that against the cost of delay that we would feel and get a weighted shortest job first. And the ones with the lowest numbers were the ones that we wanted to take first, because they would be the ones that we could use to prioritize. And it was literally from that weighted shortest job first that allowed us to come up with a number that allowed us to prioritize from lowest number to highest. And that was how we would use that to do our migration. So we now had a list of prioritized apps, and now we were at a point where we could start delivering value. So what were the actual outcomes that came from this? Well, we had 8 million in a year saved in the production support of these applications. We had 5 million a year saved in infrastructure costs from this. And there were twice yearly changes were moved actually to multiple times a day changes as a consequence of moving to this. So if you want to find out a bit more about this case study, I've got a QR code here. You can scan away if you can see and you've got your phones handy. This allows you just to see a bit more detail around the actual case study itself and find out a bit more about what we did and how we worked on it. And if you want to find out more from us in terms of details on how we did that, or want to try this yourself or find out more around cost of delay, then you can give us a shout on this QR code and contact us here at Equal Experts. That is me. Hope it wasn't too far over.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Bethan. Awesome. Yes. So that we've got a few questions. I mean, it's a really fascinating story about using something you normally think about in terms of product and revenue generation to prioritize like a migration effort, which you wouldn't normally think of it in that way. So we've got a few questions here. There's a couple from before the talk that Sheila has posted, but I think can I just I'll jump into Lindsay's question if that's all right, which is which is a bit of a challenging one. So sorry about that, but how would you approach the problem if the 50 applications were hard to separate? So at their core, for example, if there was a monolith and the linkages between them were like a ball of spaghetti or a ball of mud, and so it's quite tightly
See,
interlinked. Is there anything that is there anything?
yeah, that's difficult because I wouldn't actually classify that as a cloud migration in that sense. Because in this particular case study, what we were looking for is take the actual application in its state and then move it to the cloud, but just kind of do some work around it. Whereas the actual the way that Lindsay, I think your question is asking is if I've got one massive monolith application, how would I go about breaking that apart to actually migrate it? Or are you asking how would I just migrate that one? So it'd be good to understand which way you were thinking.
Hmm.
Not sure. If it was to break apart,
And I think also the outcomes are very different
yeah.
when you.
No, sorry, John, go on.
Sorry, I think there must be some delay on my line. Apologies. So I was thinking you gave a really good overview of some of the outcomes that we got. So you got the cost savings, but also a change in release frequency and the ability to release frequently, which would again, if they weren't independent things, would probably be a lot harder to achieve with a large monolith approach.
Yeah, and I think the question is if I'm doing a migration, then am I migrating exactly what's already there into the cloud? Whereas am I doing a kind of more of a strangler approach where I'm trying to break it all apart, then actually what I'm not actually just doing a straightforward migration. So there's other factors I'm going to be want to include. And it might actually not be cost of delay I would use as a prioritization method in that time. I'd need to look at that strangler approach to find out what the risks are, to find out if I would actually use cost of delay at that point. Sorry, that doesn't
Cool.
necessarily give you the answer you may want, Lindsay.
That's great. I'm gonna quickly just do two more questions that I can see here, and so Sam's got a great question there. So, did you find that stakeholders disagreed with the priority approach, and if so, how did you persuade them?
I actually found that before we had the data, they did disagree. But as soon as we started running through the data, then we had the evidence there in terms of facts and figures and numbers, that actually was very easy to convince them because they were on that journey of being able to get the numbers and create that cost for us um, and create the revenue or savings for us. And then when we did the prioritization of the effort, that was done in collaboration with them. So actually, I didn't really find the issue using the data. I found more of an issue using the process in the first place, whether it would work. And actually just doing it on gut feel was actually harder, but much, much easier once we had the data to drive that.
Brilliant. And the last question I was going to share from the audience, which has actually been upvoted to someone else, obviously agrees with me, which is from Ben Waterfall. How do you achieve such an impressive improvement in the rate of deploys?
Well, actually, as part of the migration process, we were looking about how we could change the way we did the deployment itself. So we looked at not just the migration of the architecture, but the structure of the teams. We looked at the structure of the way they did releases and the whole thing that came with those applications. So we used it as an opportunity to actually change the way they were working and remove away that whole separate team to deploy and run. So the team that migrated it would essentially be the ones that would own it for a while and make those changes on those applications. Previously, there was no owner for those applications. It could be anyone that was doing those changes.
All right, brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent. So we'll pause questions there. I tell you what, the great thing is though, because your talk was first, actually there's a lot of questions still on the panel. If you can see them, Bethan, if you wouldn't mind doing some offline typing, answering the questions while Abby's giving her talk, that'd be great.
Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Thanks very much, Bethan. And apologies, everyone. I'm moving around a bit because homeschooling has started online, so I think my bandwidth's getting eaten up. So I'm just finding the right spot. Abby, so can I hand over to you now for your talk, please?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was fascinating to see such a concrete application of cost of delay. So thanks for sharing that, Bethan. Let me get my screen shared here and do the dance of, does everyone see a slide? Okay, yeah, perfect, great. I know that we're here for Expert Talks, which is in itself awesome. This is great to be invited for the first time to give a talk here, but we're also here to celebrate International Women's Day. So just a quick shout out to say that we're doing great things to be able to support women in tech and in other industries, but there's still a lot of work that we can do to try and support marginalized voices around the world. So these are a few organizations that I follow and try and support. And I suggest that as a part of International Women's Day, everyone takes a moment and tries to find an organization that you feel passionately about and can support as well. So today we're going to be talking about language barriers in software delivery. And it's going to be rooted in my experience of shifting titles over the last few years. Today, I work as an SRE at a company called Duffel, where we are rebuilding the infrastructure behind travel industry to make travel effortless for travelers. But before I was an SRE with Duffel, I worked as a bunch of different roles, including platform engineer, DevOps or release engineer, QA, and others. And the diversity of roles that I've played has led to some really interesting viewpoints when I look around at how we deliver software. And I worry about the division that we're creating between these roles within our industry. It seems that we're furiously building faster and better, but we're also creating these deeper and deeper wedges between many of the different roles that help deliver software. And so obviously when I bring up language, there are some clear examples of barriers, and you can think of the language you write your software in, because this can fundamentally shape the belief about what software architecture or design looks like. In these cases, you can sometimes group languages by common characteristics, so functional programming or object-oriented. But for the most part, when we're writing software, we're all trying to solve the same problems with logic around loops and conditionals to provide business value. But it's not just this kind of obvious language when it comes to programming languages. It's also about how we deliver that software. And so when we talk about testing and delivery processes, despite having a shared desire to make sure that software we're building is correct in intention as well as in execution, and despite having a shared goal of driving that correct development through testing, we build and rebuild these unique test harnesses so that we can narrow in on the right way to drive this development. So whether it be test-driven, behavior-driven, or acceptance test-driven, we have a million different frameworks out there when they're all kind of achieving a similar end result. And so both of these are very technical examples. So you might be sitting there smug if you're not a developer and think this is just a techie quirk, but it absolutely happens on the product and business side as well, right? Like everybody's seen all these different ways to deliver software. And again, we have shared intention across all of these. We want better ways to collaborate. We want better ways to identify dependencies and delivery risks so that we can build something that's valued and on time and on budget. Yet we can debate over whether it's a sync or a stand-up, a team or a squad, and we get caught in some of those differences that do they really matter? And so you may ask, why should you care about this? In reality, people generally know what the other person's talking about, right? So let's get past those words. But I did a quick little test, and in reality, even something innocuous as the difference between calling your daily sync a scrum or calling it a stand-up can influence the content that you find online in support of learning. Aside from the fact that for some reason daily scrums come up with video options, whereas stand-ups do not, what you'll also see on this list is that there's actually only one shared article on the front page of search results. And even that one is presented differently. So depending on what you're looking for, it may or may not catch your eye, despite it being actually the exact same article. And so we talk a lot today about the divisive nature of discourse, about the isolation of people by social media companies just continuously pumping us with content that we've already shown an interest in, and how that can be creating those rifts in our communities. But the same thing I think is happening within software delivery. And from what I can tell, it's a bit more self-inflicted rather than being able to blame an algorithm somewhere. So now you may be a bit hesitant about the message. To be fair, I'm probably stretching a little bit to say that daily scrum and daily stand-up are so different that people would struggle to connect the dots and struggle to learn from each other. But I started here to get us on the same page. What I really want to do is take a deeper dive into an example where I have firsthand witnessed challenges in learning due to these language barriers. And so that brings me back to my changing in titles over the years. And so, as I said at the beginning, I've had a bit of a journey across roles in the last decade. This is a wildly problematic grouping of titles of these roles. So I'm not here to discuss, if DevOps is a role or a title, or the difference between QA and testing. Though if you've ever heard of an event called PubConf or anything like it, those are probably better for that kind of an audience. Instead, I want you to bear with me on the titles for a minute and see that these are pretty common titles across the industry, and they tend to be populated by fairly different sets of people. And that it's not super common to have both of these sets of titles on a single career path, right? It definitely happens, but it's not as common. And so I'm going to focus first in on my time as a QA. My main focus was around identifying risks in new features. I would look for confirmation that the new features were working the way they were designed to work. And I would also think outside the box and look for ways for whether or not these features were interacting with the rest of the application the way that we would expect. And particularly whether or not the changes are meeting our users' expectations from kind of consistency internal to our application, as well as consistency across other popular applications that they may use. And of course, I would also look for that unexpected thing that was bound to occur as soon as we unleashed any new feature to the public. And so many people outside of QA and testing will think of this as manual testing, because I was executing testing throughout the application. But within the community and within my peers, we call it exploratory testing. And so, as defined by Elizabeth Hendrickson, exploratory testing is simultaneously designing and executing tests to learn about the system, using your insights from the last experiment to inform the next. The key to exploratory testing is that it's really creative. It's not just following a test case that's provided to me by another person, or even provided to me by my past self. It's being creative in the moment. Exploratory testing is also intentional. It's not just clicking around like some people may think we do. It's actually going in and being intentional about what you're looking for and experimenting about. And it's intelligent. The decisions of what to focus on, what to ignore, what to ask next is based on understanding heuristics, or simple rules of thumb, and oracles, which are expectations that are built up almost invisibly around that software. And so if you run around in the professional testing circles, you'll see tons of amazing content on these two major areas that support quality exploratory testing, really great exploratory testing. One area of focus is around how we structure and report on the value of our testing. As I said, I had to explain that this isn't just me clicking around, right? There's still some perception that that is what manual testing is. And I also had to explain that it's creative and that it finds interesting and intelligent findings. That's also a misunderstanding sometimes around exploratory and manual testing. One area is to focus on that report of the value of your testing. And one technique to do this is called session-based test management. It's exemplified here on the left with a tool that's called Test Buddy, and it was created by Rajit Singh and Simon Thomas, and helps you not only collect your thoughts during exploratory testing, but also report back to your team and your organization. On the right-hand side is another equally important area that dives into deciding what the target of your testing should be. We get lots of content within the community around heuristics that can help identify risks based on delivery changes. So for example, this RCRCRC by Karen Johnson, or also other heuristics that focus on the product structure and helping you figure out where to test within that, which is one that's called SF Depot. These and tons of others try and help us shape how to prioritize our testing by making visible the breadth of what needs to get tested, as well as trying to bring to the forefront really high value, high priority things, because let's be honest, we never have enough time to test everything. It's always a crunch. And so after about 5 years as a QA, I started to shift towards the delivery and actual shipping of those features more than the building of those features. And this led to me working a lot more on infrastructure for the first time. And so I want to focus a bit on what I found when I shifted that focus. And something that's interesting to note is that when I made this transition towards more operations, more DevOps and platform and SRE, it also coincided with a time when chaos engineering really was taking off. So chaos engineering is rooted in a set of tools that was created by Netflix that they call the Simian Army. And this happened in the early 2010s. They later had a role that is called a chaos engineer, and that was kind of 2014-ish. And when I was coming into this space in around 2015, 2016, we were getting this explosion of really interesting SaaS products that were making a very competitive and popular market around these techniques. So let's figure out, what is chaos engineering? Well, chaos engineering is a practice that focuses on the realities of running software, basically the unknown, right? It proposes that if you can calculate the risk of the failure rate of a disk after a certain amount of time, you'll start to realize that it's highly likely that when you run an application at scale, you will see a disk failure. And so you need to be able to handle that. And it proposes that the best way to handle failure is to practice until that failure can be dealt with easily and comfortably. So this is a resource that's provided that is an example of how to identify useful things that you may want to test yourself with and experiment with so that you can trust you can handle that failure easily. Example, a disk filling up, super common when you get an influx of error logs. All of a sudden you end up with more problems because of disks filling up, or running out of memory, another really big common problem that we see in software today. In addition, there's a lot of discussion in the community about how to structure the long-term value of these experiments and how to structure and track learnings. So here's the page from one of those SaaS products I mentioned, Gremlin in this case, and it talks about that ability to track and share and schedule experiments as a key sales pitch for the application. And that's because chaos engineering is really intentional. It's not just about pulling the power cord. You know, you think about that when you think about chaos or just throwing crazy things at the system. It's instead about preparing to be resilient to a proposed failure scenario and then testing that resiliency for whether or not it's there and true. Chaos engineering is also really creative. It requires thinking about the seams of what happens in those other environments. And they very often operate at a scale that we struggle to even imagine, right? We can't create these scenarios. We might be able to recreate some of these scenarios on our local machines, but the problems we care about are not on our local machines. They're in these production, large, sprawling environments. Chaos engineering is also very intelligent. In order to succeed at chaos engineering, you need to bring together an understanding of business value, system level risks, and worthwhile preventative measures. What you're investing in matters. Why you choose to test certain things, certain experiments matters. And so a quick recap of where we've been. On the one hand here, we have exploratory testing, which Elizabeth Hendrickson defined as simultaneously designing and executing tests to learn about the system and using those insights from the last experiment to inform the next. And it's supported by tools to help us focus and target our testing, as well as support the output of testing results. On the other hand, we have chaos engineering, which is described by industry-leading Gremlin team as a disciplined approach to identifying failures before they become outages, which involves running thoughtful, planned experiments that teach us how our systems behave in the face of failure. And chaos engineering as a practice is supported by tools that can help with tracking and sharing those experiments, as well as identifying key targets to run experiments against. And so I clearly sound quite repetitive, but that's because these techniques are repetitive. They have a super strong overlap. And yes, they have some unique bits, but they're very strongly connected. And so in some ways, by seeing both of these clearly, by working with both of these as a professional, I feel like I almost have a superpower because I can share these learnings across communities. For example, when I discuss my QA experiences with my chaos engineering friends and colleagues, there's an immediate interest in my experiences of shifting away from a perception of clicking around, because chaos engineering has had a really hard time with being taken seriously, given that chaos is a part of their name. And so they're really facing the exact same challenges. But overall, this isn't a superpower, it's actually a weakness. I don't want my realization to be special. What I actually want is for this to be so obvious to everybody so that the communities can actually work together, we can learn together, and we can get further together, because I've seen so many brilliant people in both of them. And so I want to wrap up with sharing the origin myth story of the Tower of Babel. It's a myth from the book of Genesis, and it attempts to explain why the world is populated by such diversity in language. The story goes that after years of turmoil through the Great Flood, the human race survives and bands together to migrate east. Eventually, they decide to settle down and that they should start to build a city and to build a tower within that city that can reach as high as the heavens. But God wanted to disband this superpower before they could do that. And the humans he did not want the humans to be able to achieve such a thing. And in order to disband the superpower, God dispersed the humans around the planet. But even more so, he changed their languages so that they could no longer understand each other. And so the key to this myth, and my idea, is that distance was not enough. It was the power of shared language that was the biggest threat. Our language is derived from and helps shape our culture, our experiences, and what we can achieve in our world. And when we share conversations with people of a different background, we grow in new and different ways. Similarly, if we end up missing out on those stories where we can't share language, then that can influence and limit our understanding as well as our opportunities. And so I hope that this very short talk has encouraged you to explore how the use of these specific technique languages can be powerful within your communities, but also isolating to people of different backgrounds. And it may actually be more harmful to your personal and your community opportunities to grow because you aren't taking advantage of learning from other areas. And so I hope it encourages you just to speak without intent more, right? It's not about stopping your learning and stopping your progress, but speak about the intent of these practices you're following through. See where else this is being done. Reach out to other departments to find common goals and work together so that we can be stumbling through towards a shared language rather than sprinting into a single language silo, because that stumbling will result in much faster, much more effective results in the long run. So thank you. I think we have some time for questions, I hope. So yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Abby. No, it's I definitely, from my experience, when you're talking about the approach for exploratory testing, I certainly have seen conflation of manual testing of kind of following test scripts conflated with the practice of exploratory testing, deciding where the areas of threat and risk are, and applying human ingenuity to those. So that's brilliant. Thank you. So we've got some questions that we received before the talk, but if there's anything that any questions people have got, please do drop them in the Q&A panel. But I really like this one when I was taking notes. It resonated with me, which is, so if we're trying to engage everyone across disciplines, how does this affect, or does it remove the value of expertise, or how does it affect the value of expertise?
Yeah, I think that idea of the generalizing specialists, do you have a generalist, do you have a specialist, which is higher value? We tend to As an industry, we tend to pendulum swing on that, on the value. And I definitely see value in specialists, and the intention of this isn't to take that away. But I think that where a specialist is particularly powerful and senior and experienced is when they can explain their specialism to people outside of it. How can they break it down, the explain like I'm five kind of discussion? And that is where I guess what I'm looking for when I'm on teams with specialists that I value and I respect is how can they bring me into their world? How can they reach into my world so that we're actually having the same conversation, even if that's translating maybe into different backgrounds ourselves. So yeah, I think it's the power is being able to teach others your specialty. And this is just asking you to do that, to speak from intent first.
Sorry, I'm muted. That's great.
Nice.
Excellent. Thank you. Um, and so talking from intent first. So have you got? Do you have some examples of that where it's sort of where you've seen good examples of people talking from a common intent across these two? I won't say silos, but these specialist contexts.
Yeah, I think anytime you're in an organization that's allergic to buzzwords, you get really good practice with this. And I think you should, right? You shouldn't be able to walk into a room and just say agile, drop it on the table and walk away, right? Or continuous delivery, drop it on the table and walk away. But I think certain organizations do require that a bit more, like really push you to think about why continuous delivery, why agile, why any of the practices that you're suggesting. So I think that the exploratory testing and chaos engineering example is a great one, because why are you investing in exploring anything? Why are you pulling out the cord? Why are you testing if memory runs out? Is that a risk for your business? I have actually tried to throw out ideas for chaos engineering scenarios that once I got kind of challenged on why are you doing this? And I worked together with some business, like key leaders in business, I realized that if we were to be impacted by that kind of a scenario, we're okay with it. And so an example being maybe a business that is has high elasticity with its users and is running on AWS. And so therefore dependent on an AWS service like in S3 or whatever, that pretty much the whole internet is dependent on. And you sit there and you go, if AWS is down, we are not going to be the problem at this time, right? So do we need to worry about investing in having redundancy around how we use S3 and AWS? Or are we okay with taking that risk as long as we have backups in case something really catastrophic happens? So you have backups that aren't usable live, but you at least have them, and let's not invest any further than that. And I think that's where driving towards intent and why do you care? And in this case, the care for me was I wanted resiliency if S3 was an issue. Actually, when I started driving it, why I wanted to do that experiment, turned out that there was a much better way of spending my time. So.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. And so another question, which is, how can people identify situations when they're unintentionally using siloed language? I think
Yeah.
one of the things I was reflecting on there. Sorry, I was thinking of tying in with another very selfish question, which is, it feels a bit like what you're describing there is actually the more expert people get within their area, the more sort of shorthand terms that they use to explain the depth of the complexity of their specialism. But then the more siloing that probably is, so the harder it then is to come up and have the meaningful conversation that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think
and so
everyone, if they can see the problem, right, then they know that they want to solve it. It's knowing that there's a problem. So how many times are you in a room where you use a 3-letter acronym and about 10 minutes later, someone goes, you do think that means this, right? And you're like, whoa, wait a second. And you're just in completely different camps on that. And so I don't think anyone's doing this intentionally. That's not the point here. But I think some ways that I've used in the past is just doing a lot more training for entry-level people, even within your specialty, I think can help you break down that where you're starting to build those barriers, or not intentionally building barriers, but building that depth of understanding where you start to shorthand things. All of a sudden, someone who's within your specialty still doesn't understand you, still needs some help there. Now that's starting to give you a little bit of a insight into what someone outside your specialty would feel. And so it's a bit of a softer entry to finding some of those places where you might be cutting corners or using shortcuts. And I think it's building, for me, it's also about building a culture within the team. I fail at this every day in some form or some manner. I use something that could be isolating or could be shorthand or whatever. But by having a team that we all take turns of being aware when someone else has said something, and having a culture where it's free and open to ask questions. What do you mean by that? Like, how does that relate? Now all of a sudden it's bringing more information to the common pool of understanding. And so it is a village. It takes a village kind of an activity, right? Not one person can drive this by themselves. It really has to be a whole community. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. All right, excellent. So we are going to pause it. We're going to finish up there. I think we've had a couple of excellent talks today. Thank you, Bethan. Thank you, Abby. Really appreciate it. And we've had some really great questions. So lots of insightful questions from the audience. So thank you, everyone, for that. So later on this evening, I mean, it's going dark outside where Bethan is, so obviously not later in the evening for her in Australia, but later on in this evening, UK time, at 6 p.m, we have got another session of lightning talks. This will be, the second session will be hosted by Thomas Granier, our founder at Equal Experts. And the speakers this evening will be Lisa Copeland, so she is the SVP of Client Engagement for EE North America. Julia Bellis is a product consultant at Equal Experts, and Katie Coleman is VP of Client Engagement in North America. And Lisa will be talking about how the digital race is on and how companies are keeping pace in today's digital ecosystem. Julia makes the case that Florence Nightingale is a pioneer of agile ways of working. And Katie will be talking about how to reframe change and adopt new behaviors to make them stick and support an ever evolving and changing world. So 3 great talks this evening, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for that.
If you happen to be in Australia, that's 5 a.m. Or if you're in Auckland or Wellington, that's 7 a.m. So a nice early start for you. It's a great talk for you there.
Nice early start with the cornflakes and a strong cup of coffee at that time, I should think. All right, brilliant. So thank you very much again, Bethan. Thank you, Abby. Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you, Tony, for your help. That's a huge help with the Q&As there. I know everyone appreciated that. So thanks all. Have a great day. Catch you later.